Welcome to Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators, and thanks for joining us today. On this podcast, we'll explore leadership, innovation, and growth in the life sciences sector. I'm Don Alexander, founder of GeneCoda, a boutique executive search firm dedicated to connecting visionary leaders with life sciences companies shaping the future of therapeutics and scientific tools. On each episode, we'll dive into candid conversations with industry pioneers, uncovering strategies, insights, and real-world experiences that drive success in our industry. If you're interested in presenting as a guest of a future episode, please scan the barcode image at the top of my video frame and follow the instructions. Now I'm pleased to be joined by Darren Dasburg, the CEO of Clarus Biologics. Darren is a veteran of over 40 years in biopharma, spanning roles at Glaxo, MedImmune, AstraZeneca, and multiple biotech startups, including two CRISPR-based ventures that reached successful exits. A licensed professional engineer, Darren holds a mechanical engineering degree from Colorado State and an MBA from Duke's Fuqua School. He's led global manufacturing teams, built strategic alliances like the Trusted Partner Network with Merck, and remains active in mentoring and nonprofit leadership. When not running Clarus, Darren rather enjoys golf, home-cooked meals, and Oak Island beaches. Welcome, Darren.
Thanks for having me, Don. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. So let's dive right in, Darren. Talk a little bit about your career journey and your leadership philosophy. Perhaps you can share a little bit about your background in engineering at GlaxoSmithKline and maybe all the way up to founding Clarus Biologics.
It's an interesting journey. I appreciate you asking that. The probably most amazing part of it is that I came out of school as a mechanical engineer. And so in 1981, the only place I could really go was into the power industry or into oil and gas. And I didn't fancy a life on offshore platforms. So I came to North Carolina to help build the Sharon Harris nuclear plant and became part of the nuclear engineering team there. But what was happening as I moved into town was really quite phenomenal with Glaxo and lots of big pharma companies starting up in the park. And so there was this sort of decision to be made about, do I want to make electricity or do I want to get involved with making cures for people that might need them one day? And so it was a pretty easy decision for me to get over to that side of the game. But it was interesting to watch because my education was not suited to pharma. I'd never even really seen a lot of pharma engineering up until that point, but it was good to get into that. And that really kind of shaped me very quickly. You get into a mode where you're watching pipelines of products go through. Some are failing, some are succeeding. People are being heralded. People are moving out of the company. We went through mergers. I got my MBA while I was there. And so I ended up being more on the business side of these equations. And so my leadership style was sort of, what do we got to do for the people to get them through all this? And how can we match up to their expectations and make things as best as we can? Mergers are often difficult things to do, but they were very early part of my education for sure. And I learned a lot of things I think that most leaders have learned and that you've probably heard from others, that people expect integrity. They want empathy in the form of listening. And they really want to know that the people are thinking about them from their career perspective and what we can do for them. So uh, pharmaceuticals just seem to offer a great opportunity in that regard. And here I am today after years of being in big pharma and now in small companies leading startups. I'm still amazed at what the teams can put together and what we can get accomplished.
That's a great overview, Darren. How have your experience, you touched on this, but yeah, I'm kind of curious about how your experiences have shaped your approach to leadership in the biotech sector. Clarus is obviously a much smaller company than Glaxo, and perhaps some of that mergers and acquisitions has had an influence even on how you approach things today.
Absolutely. The bigger companies are really different entities altogether than the smaller entrepreneurial sectors. But what you learn in the big companies is a lot about leadership. And so I got to be part of many groups that were putting together the foundations of leadership for Glaxo and leadership lessons and things like that. And so we had a lot of emphasis on that. And that was reinforced by school. And so in the big forum, you really have to have a lot of that because there's just so much communication so much need to keep people informed of what's going on. You come to the smaller companies, now what was bureaucratic in the big companies is all gone because everybody has to do everything themselves. We're a company of 5 people, for example, and we do everything ourselves. That if we went to a bigger company, we might see 60, 70 people doing the things that we're doing right now. And so communication isn't that difficult because we have much smaller group to talk to, basically. But getting all the tasks done and keeping everything organized, the planning and organizing part of our leadership model right now is really quite extensive just to keep all the pieces moving in the right direction. So it's really 2 different worlds altogether. I'm glad I made the jump. I don't think I could have made the jump when I was first getting out of school and stuff. But having studied entrepreneurship in Duke's MBA program and then getting the chance to actually put it to work in these 4 startups that you mentioned has been really just a pinnacle part of my career.
That's great. Maybe if you can touch on just a little bit about your motivations, and in moving with Clarus Biologics into the immunology and vaccine, kind of adjuvant technology space at large.
Yes, it's a little bit of kismet, maybe serendipity even. The first 2 startups I went through were CRISPR based, as you mentioned, and those 2 reached exits. And so I went on to a third one called Gradient Medical, and it's in cancer ablation for solid tumors. It's a medical device. The company was stepping into a very large animal study that was going to take quite a while. And so I was fairly free with my time at that point because there wasn't much executive in residence to do. And the North Carolina Biotech Center called me and said, "Hey, what are you doing? We've got Clarus Biologics. They could use some help. They need some more commercial business development kind of things." Went up, met Bob Johnson and Peter Anderson, and hit it off well. And so delighted to join them. And their technology was really what took me a little bit by storm because I had worked a little bit in vaccines, which is Bob Johnson, our CSO's full history. I'd worked a bit in vaccines with people like Shubei Chow and stuff at MedImmune and learned a lot about that, but never really had to make a difference in it. I was part of the team that had that, but not really working on it directly. So it was good to come back and see that and see what they had worked on. But to me, what was amazing about it is just that there was so much work done by, in this case, Bob Johnson, who spent his whole career in this science and put tremendous amounts of grant money together for UNC at Chapel Hill and put this technology to paper, got the patents all issued. Then when he retired, he got the exclusive rights to develop it and do something with it. So I had seen this many times in my career where scientists spend their whole life working on something and it never turns into something. And it's really probably one of the most disappointing things to ever witness. But this was some good science. There were really great attributes and numbers behind it. And so I took it on and my quest right now is to make sure that everything that they've worked on so hard can come true for patients when it's all said and done.
That's fantastic, Darren. Leads me to into the kind of the work that Clarus does. Maybe you can explain a little bit about how CBI3A works and its advantages over traditional adjuvants.
Yes, and this is what's kind of really cool about this technology is it positions us for 3 verticals. So you'll hear me sometimes talk about vaccines and adjuvants, which is the technique there. But you'll hear me talk about immuno-oncology products as well, especially in the leukemia space. And then the third area for us is really the platform as a whole. And the platform as a whole has the possibility to make proteins. It has the possibility to do a lot more things in the future. Obviously, we could create our own products out of that as well. But for today, given that we're a startup and we have a focus and we have client base that's really looking for these kind of things, we stay a little bit more on the first hand side of that, which is vaccines. An adjuvant is something that helps make somebody else's product work better. And so we co-inject this with somebody's antigenic mass. Somebody has gone to the work of discovering a flu vaccine or some new kind of vaccine. And what they really want is they want the immune system to pick it up and do something with it. And we've learned this in a lot of modern day kind of vaccines that a lot of product is not being used by the body. It's just being flushed out. And doses have gotten very high to try to accommodate that and not made any progress. And so the adjuvant mechanism for this particular cell is one that goes in through the dendritic pathway through the draining lymph node. And as we get inside of that, we're going to actually enter those dendritic cells. And we've got a mechanism inside of our vessel. Think of it like a viral vector, has RNA pieces in it that are going to start a fast replication. And inside your body, the last thing the body wants to see is something replicating very fast that it doesn't understand. And so it's going to take that into immunological memory. The antigen being side by side with it is co-processed with that. And then what's going to happen is that the body's going to make a very strong reaction. And this is coming out of the innate side of your immune system. You have two sides, innate and adaptive. The adaptive system is what takes care of everything that you breathe or the hands that you shake every day. You take on a lot of pathogens, even in the food you eat. You have a more mild system that can take care of those things. But the innate system is really the 5-alarm fire signal for the body that says, we've got to look at this much more seriously. So when that product gets into those cells, it's going to replicate like crazy, set off that alarm, and then the immune system has its own mechanisms that will actually wash our product out within a day. And so now the energetic mass being recognized by the body is in position now to do what it's supposed to do, and that our clients have worked on for quite a while. The amazing part about it is that what we find is that we can bring the doses down tremendously, 10 to 20 fold. So that's a real savings for our customers. And we also, in the primate studies that we've done, can get 100% increase in the efficacy. So we want to take this technology onto humans now and prove that it can do exactly the same thing. There's a lot of evidence that that's going to be true based on our research. And so we're really excited about trying to bring some efficiency and some efficacy back to the market through this thing that most people don't even know about, called a Vero cell. And just a minute on that. The Vero cell is the Venezuelan equine encephalitis cell, which sounds pretty daunting, but it's been used quite a bit in the polio vaccine. It's been neutered down to be something safe. It's very well tolerated in the human body. The body knows what to do with it, basically. And so just being able to manufacture with that technology is really quite the challenge for anybody who's getting into it. Is that's why it hasn't really manifested itself as the common cell that everybody wants to use. But it really works well for us. It's a circular DNA kind of methodology. It's a little more complicated maybe than we can offer on this podcast, but I'm delighted to help people understand it a little bit more as we go on.
That sounds great, Darren. Really great explanation. Sounds like the technology may ultimately be able to, I guess, reduce maybe the cost of goods sold, if I'm thinking about this correctly, and boost the efficacy at the same time, which is an amazing outcome.
It is. And if you think about a vaccine today, the classic vaccines cost about $8.81 per vaccine. $4 of that is making that energetic mass that I mentioned. So you're right. As a company who makes a vaccine, they're really looking at cost quite hard. And if you come over to the animal vaccine world, it's really a major thing that they focus on, because cattle costs and chickens and things like that, they don't want to add a lot of cost to the cost of the meat.
Absolutely. Oh, that's great. Are there other, I guess, trends in vaccine, potentially development, even innate immunity that excites you, or that you all are looking at for that matter?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, all these new techniques are cell and gene therapy techniques, right? We didn't have them 2 decades ago. And so we're really making use of a lot of new technologies. And I think what you're going to find is that this kind of technology can creep into lots of different places. So as I mentioned, we can work as a viral vector. And what that means is a viral vector can go into the body and can carry a plasmid on the inside of it to a place that you want it to go, and make an interface with that particular cell, distribute a drug or distribute a therapy, and make a difference. Well, that allows us now to take a lot of newer kinds of entities and modalities of products into the body that we didn't have in the past. And if you just sort of take the whole history reel of the pharma industry back to synthetic chemistry days, we really had roughly 115 targets in the body to work with. We went on to monoclonal antibodies and biotech, and that picked up another 335. And now we're standing looking at 7,000 genetic disorders that could be attached, 2,000 of which people think are really addressable. And so I think the shots on goal, the ability to help people with lots of rare diseases as well as common diseases could be really quite useful. These products can go a lot further than the classical vaccine that you've seen or heard about in the past, including things like cancer vaccines and universal flu vaccines, stuff like that.
Excellent. Excellent. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the scaling, funding, and business strategy for Clarus. What have been the company's key milestones to date, and maybe you could talk a little bit about the growth trajectory.
Yeah, so we've been focused on a handful of things since my introduction to the company in May of 23. So they got started in 2020, right when the pandemic started, which was a little bit of poor timing, but they were watching a lot of things unfold that they didn't get invited to, but they learned a lot of lessons from because they were so young at the time. But those lessons that came out of the pandemic were really quite instrumental to us. And one of those was helping us to find where we could play a big role in that some of these pandemic vaccines were up at 10 to the 15th dose. And that was a huge amount of dose to a human body. And it was going systemically to every cell in the body. So at 10 to the 5th, maybe 10 to the 6th, our products could be administered and we could get just to that dendritic platform and do what I was saying before. So sort of that discovery of how we would be differentiated from some of the past products was really important to us. It led us to the studies that I mentioned with the mouse and monkey studies. As I came on in May of 23, it was really about getting the business started up. And we were working out of Bob Johnson's home, essentially. And so it's very difficult to get a grant when you're working out of your house. So we needed a lab. We obviously needed funding. And so we went to work and found a good deal on a lab at the Discovery Center in Research Triangle Park. And that's where we are today. Just a 4,800 square foot lab, nothing huge, but perfect for a startup. In fact, we co-share it with tenants just because we don't need all the space quite yet. The next thing we needed to do was start making our virus-like particle again and get it perfected from a process so that we could push on to GMP perspectives. So we have made thousands of doses in this lab now. And we've learned, again, many, many things, right? Which reagents are the best ones, which supply chain people we should be using, what are the analytical measures, how will this translate to a GMP audit, for example. The next milestone after that is really kind of where we're at right now. We will try to get ourselves set up with a GMP manufacturer basis. So there's a lot of work to transfer a product into a GMP base. We won't make it ourselves, but we have the ability to contract with some local people. And they have a lot of skills, but you have to take this technology and put it in their hands. And so to get all the pieces in place, think of it like a checklist if you're a pilot or something, you have to have a lot of pieces in place before you can literally ask somebody else to make it for you. Otherwise, you're going to get a very muddled kind of response. The providers will always try to do their best to help you, but the more information you can give them, the better it is. That comes along with some of the analytic measures that we're still vetting out and making sure we have everything just in place that we want, finalizing the purification techniques, things like that. And that will all get cleared up hopefully this year so that we can put that in their hands by the fourth quarter. In parallel to that, we're having conversations with lots of big pharma companies, names that you'd recognize in what I call the elite 11 pharma companies, the top of the arch, if you will, for pharma companies. And they are interested in this technology and they have lots of good questions and lots of things to think about, especially because they'd be introducing something new. They tend to want to do their own manufacturing, so it's an even longer conversation about that. We're also looking at research collaborations. We have one going on with an animal vaccine company out in Oklahoma. We have another one in talks right now with a university that everybody would recognize the name of. And so I'll just leave that quiet for right now. But those kind of partnerships mean a tremendous amount to the next milestone, which is really our funding beyond the seed funding. And so I think funding is something you're going to want to talk a little bit about, but I can certainly go into detail about that. But by the end of the year, we want to get to a $5 million Series A or pre-series funding as our investors see fit.
No, that's great. I mean, please feel free to continue on with that. I was curious about the timelines and human clinical trials and all that's in front of you. So please feel free.
Yeah, sure. To just give people a sense of funding, if you haven't ever been in a startup, nearly all of these things start with grant funding, what they call non-dilutive funding. In other words, you get money, you don't have to pay it back. It doesn't change your share basis or anything like that. You use it, you get done with it, you move on to more commercial things. The grant funding filters out as you start to move towards commercial things because they want discovery science. So you have to go after seed investors. And from the time I came on, we have put together 1.3 million in seed funding to basically help us stay alive through these early years. And this is often called friends and family money. It comes in lots of different forms. North Carolina Biotech Center helped us out. We've had some of our really good partners have helped us out in the way that they bill us and things like that. We've put a lot of creative things together to help make sure that we can make this money last as long as possible. Then you go to Series A funding typically, which is what does it take to get to some big milestone? Like I mentioned, the GMP manufacturer. In our case, that's about $5 million. If somebody looked at us and said, no, we'd like to go after the whole platform right now, it'd be like a $50 million discussion. But people like things in smaller bites, basically. And so you try to put something in front of your investors that can make a difference. That GMP funding would allow us to get material, that would allow us to supply the partners, which would allow us to participate in human clinical trials, and then would allow us to get the kind of data that we need for our partners. Remember, they're funding the studies, they sponsor the studies. And so we want them to use our product as an additive, an adjuvant, and then go from there as we go forward to see what we can do with it. I think what we'll find is that people want to use it as a viral vector to carry certain kinds of therapies to critical parts of the body. And I think in time, they may even want us to do some work with them on a protein production basis, given the efficiency. We might actually find out in another parallel study that we can make proteins a lot more efficient than the classic kind of bigger bioreactors. Right now, we work in very small batches, 2.5 liters, and we get almost 10,000 doses from that. So that's kind of a ridiculous scale, if you will. This plant behind me is the Boulder facility in Colorado that had two 20,000 liter reactors, and every batch made 3,300 from 20,000 liters. So give that some consideration.
That's an order of magnitude, isn't it?
Yes.
So is there, just based on your experience with Clarus or even previously, Darren, is there any other advice, I suppose? I mean, you all have a great partnership model. It sounds like. I'm curious if there's other advice that you might give to biotech startups in a broad sense, seeking funding and potentially strategic partnerships.
Yeah, I think that people need to really give some credence to the entrepreneurial environment. I mentioned the Elite 11, the companies we all know at the top, the Pfizers, the Mercks, all of them. You've got another tranche of big biotech companies that include the Amgens and the Biogens, about 25 of those companies. Several of those are just CDMOs, though. And then you've got 2,980 plus companies in the cell and gene space right now. They won't all make it. They won't all survive, but they have a lot of good ideas out there. And I think that they're going to be a big factor in the future of science. There's no doubt about it. The national debate in this country is pushing a lot of things, including the big pharma companies. And I think that they're going to be looking for more efficient ways to get things done. And so on the grant picture, as I mentioned, when you're a big university like MIT and you can't get grants anymore from the government, you start to turn to the big companies and say, why don't I just work directly with you? And in a speech I heard recently from MIT, they're working with Lilly directly. Lilly has a budget that's 1/4 that of NIH, right? So new connections are being made that are kind of lateral to what we've seen in the past that I think are going to create a lot of opportunities for not only the academic researchers, but people that want to start up companies and collaborate with those academic partners. So be thinking about how that could happen for you. I think there's a lot of people out there who have spent years in the bigger pharma companies and they're ready to make a jump. And I think that the excitement of these kind of startups could be something for them. I think that they should give some serious thought to jumping in on one of these and seeing what true excitement is, seeing what it's like when you raise money from your friends and how hard you will work to make sure that that money sees the light of day. It's not for everybody, but it is exciting for sure. And I think that there's just a lot of things that can help them get there. As I talk to young people, and I do spend a lot of time with young members, and so for your listeners, I really do want to help people get to these things. And so I do a lot of mentoring with people and a lot of listening to what they're looking for in their careers. I think that they would do well to think about these companies, and to do that, they've got to stay in touch with people. And I'm kind of surprised that a lot of very young researchers in the universities and stuff, you go to the friends and family dialogue and they don't have any friends and family. Now, that's not true, of course, but they don't have any that they've built relationships with over time that know this industry, that would invest in it, that could help the business come along. And those friends and families tend to make you more connections in the venture capital and limited partner range, and you'll start to meet up people. I've been working with people since I got into this, from way back in my days at Glaxo, that I've come back in touch with, and they've given me a tremendous amount of advice, just because I was willing to pick up the phone and say, hey, let's talk and have a beer, or let's go play some golf or something. And so I think the element of relationships is so important to young people that are trying to put their career in front of them and start to say, what am I going to do with it as I get older? And never forget that somebody you meet, he has a name, he has a life, he has interests. You need to remember that. And you need to make sure that you can communicate with that person in the future and see things that are going on. I still know pretty much all the names of the people at that plant, for example. I know many people that I've worked with through time and their family members and what they've been interested in as they've been going on. I know the ones that have retired and don't want to ever see our business again. And I know the ones that are interested in keeping it going on. But you can only do that if you make a lot of relationships and you really work hard at it. And I think everybody who's young and wants to get in this business just needs to think, how could I be a business development person if I wanted to really make my career succeed? How do I sell myself? How do I get out there and build these bridges? Where can I go from there, and what leadership traits will be important for that? They need to stay in touch with folks like yourself, coaches, mentors that they may have had from business. There's just so many places that they can get insight to their future that is beyond their college years, for sure.
It's a really interesting perspective. We constantly espouse that, Darren, but I don't think I've ever heard it put quite that way. And so thank you for that. A good lesson for everyone on this call. Um, as we think about your vision for the future, for the company's future, intermediate and long-term goals for Clarus, and any upcoming projects or initiatives that you're particularly excited about. Obviously, you've got the GMP piece, production piece, Series A forthcoming. What else is the company going to be exploring?
Well, we have this immuno-oncology platform that we're really quite interested in. And I've done a tremendous amount of work with folks that are probably even on this call helping me. And we've dug out 187 companies that work down the dendritic pathway, right? So being the business developer I am, I've reached out to every single one of them. And Don, I'm sure you won't be surprised, they don't all call you back. No one answers their phone anymore. Emails are kind of screened by the spam filter. So it's quite a game to try to catch up with people. And so there's a lot of contracts to be had through these contacts if I can get them to get engaged with us. And that, I think, is really the biggest goal right now, is to get more people talking to Clarus and get them to understand exactly how this science works and to see if we can make a difference in it. We're going to see some benefits possibly in solid tumors as well. Leukemia is kind of our primary target here. But I think that there's just so much more to do, and that there's just so much need in this world. I mean, you've got 20 million people worldwide, I think it is, that have cancer every year, and most of them we can't treat. So I think there's just a tremendous set of milestones ahead of companies like ours. And I'm willing to help other companies. So mergers and acquisitions are not out of the question for me. I'm willing to give advice to people that are starting companies. And we're certainly looking at a lot of technology from over 6,000 development labs around the world through a network of things called Impart, which is really quite interesting as well. So I think those are going to turn into the kind of contracts that we want. But we'll keep working with the universities. There's another group of people that have something called VTEU colleges, so they're vaccine technology education efforts, and we're trying to get on board with them because they do clinical trials in flu every year, and they are sponsors of trials. And so again, from an efficiency perspective, having them work with us is actually probably the most efficient way that we can go to get on with things. And it's just a matter of putting these deals together and getting people to stay engaged with us as we go through the process.
That's great, Darren. How can listeners, I guess, connect with you and stay updated on Clarus Biologics developments?
Yeah, I'm very open to that. And so I think you'll find me very easily on LinkedIn. I'm probably the only Darren Dasburg on the world. And so feel free to connect with me. I pretty much accept all invitations and talk to many people every week. But obviously, you can email me at ddasburg@clarusbiologics.com. Delighted to have a dialogue with you anytime you like. Let's compare some notes, grab some coffee, see what we can build here in Research Triangle Park, and see what we can make come true one day. I'd love to do it. And I'd also welcome anybody to come see our lab. We have a nice lab over at Discovery Park there, and delighted to have you come by and see what it's like to be in a startup situation and how we put these things together.
That's very gracious, Darren. We really appreciate that. Any final thoughts or advice that you'd like to share with the audience?
Be curious for sure. You cannot get enough reading in this industry. And just this weekend, I got a 285-page report on cancer, and every page of it is really interesting. And so it justifies reading every page just to really understand what's going on. And I think that might be a little bit old school for some people, but if you're a podcast lover, then watch these kind of things as often as you can. There's other great podcasts out there, including Don's as well, that are in cell and gene areas that can give you a lot of insight to what's happening and more dialogue around how these companies are structuring themselves. But if you're standing in a job right now looking at that job as this is what I do, I'm in the supply chain or I'm in QA or something, and this piece of paper is going to cross my desk, I promise you that that's not the only thing you can do in life. And so there's much more to be considered if you want to think about small companies. And my advice is worth exactly what you pay for it. I'll give it to you for free. But delighted to help you where I can. And we'll go on to bring many more things to the markets as we can. In my spare time, I'm helping other companies who are looking at some of these molecules to make decisions about them and see if we can get them onto the market as well. And you'll see some great things coming out very shortly. You've seen the sickle cell anemia drugs. You've seen the elements of a baby just a week ago who had a liver situation that they did a genetic alteration on at birth. And that baby will now not die of that liver disease. That's very rare. And so that's pretty amazing when you get down to the personalized level like that. I mean, this is a market that's really going to open up and change everybody's world quite a bit. You're going to learn a lot more about what you put in your body and how your body reacts to it and what your immune system can do, how you're affected by things in the environment. You're going to learn terms like epigenetics, which I'll be glad to explain to you if you want to call me. You're going to understand a lot more about science just by staying curious about it and reading everything you can get your hands on, or watching and learning everything you can get your hands on. There's just a tremendous amount of benefit out there and some really, really great people that can help you along the way, as I have found through my career.
That's a great overview, Darren. I really appreciate that. Lots of words of wisdom for the audience today. So that wraps up this episode of Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators. I appreciate you tuning in rather, and hope that you found today's conversation as valuable as I did. If you enjoyed the discussion, please be sure to leave us a review and share it with your network. And please also mark your calendars for Friday, June 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with Saurabh Jory of Katina Biosciences. Thanks for